My sister planted drugs in my room and called the cops, and my parents took her side. My parents backed her up as witnesses, knowing I was innocent. Just take the blame, they told me. But then my lawyer showed them this. My mom went completely pale. My dad couldn't speak. It didn't feel like the day my life fell apart. There was no dramatic soundtrack, no knot in my stomach, no ice-cold shiver down my spine like people always describe when disaster strikes. It was just an ordinary Wednesday. The kind that starts mundane and stays that way until suddenly everything explodes. If I'd known what was coming, that by dinner time I'd be in handcuffs while my parents stood there nodding as I got arrested in my own foyer, I probably wouldn't have worn my lucky socks with the cartoon tacos on them. But I didn't know. Not until the knock. There were two of them. One tall and lean, the other built like a football coach who'd forgotten how to crack a smile. Both in crisp uniforms, calm and rehearsed like they'd done this dance 1,000 times before. Hazel Montgomery? My throat went dry. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because nobody expects police officers to show up at your front door like you'd ordered them from DoorDash. Yeah, I said, half answering, half questioning. We received an anonymous tip about illegal substances at this address, the tall one said, reading from his notepad like he was ordering coffee. We'd like to come inside and take a look around. Behind them, Maple Street looked exactly the same. Same white picket fence, same oak tree, same Mrs. Henderson's golden retriever watching through her kitchen window. But everything felt tilted sideways, like someone had shifted the world 3 degrees to the left. Okay, I said, stepping back. I didn't even think to refuse because I wasn't guilty. Because in that moment, I assumed this was about my sister. I figured Natalie had finally pushed her luck too far. I followed them down the hallway, still confused, still trying to piece together what they'd said. Illegal substances. Had Natalie's party crowd finally crossed a line? Then I saw my mom. She was in the living room, perfectly composed, coffee mug in hand, like she was expecting dinner guests instead of law enforcement. "Oh, officers," she said, setting her mug down with a gentle clink. "Hazel's bedroom is the second door upstairs." I blinked hard. What? Why my room? Nobody answered. My dad was standing by the mantelpiece, arms crossed. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look at me at all. The officers didn't wonder or search. They moved with purpose, heading straight upstairs like they'd been given a treasure map. Natalie stood at the top of the staircase, leaning against the banister. Designer jeans, oversized sweater, phone clutched in her manicured fingers. She didn't say a word, didn't even blink. Our old beagle Copper lifted his head when they entered my room. He didn't bark, just wagged his tail once, slow and uncertain, like he wasn't sure what kind of moment this was supposed to be. The tall officer scanned my space. The other went straight to my dresser, and without hesitation, pulled open the bottom drawer. There it was. A clear plastic baggie full of white pills. I actually laughed, a short, stunned sound. Because what else do you do when reality jumps off the rails? Okay, that's definitely not mine, I said, my voice sounding foreign in my own ears. Neither officer reacted. They'd heard it all before. I spun around fast, looking for backup that should have been automatic. My parents were crowding the doorway now. Mom's hands were clasped like she was in prayer. Dad still wouldn't meet my eyes. "Tell them," I said, louder now. "You know that's not mine." One of the officers turned to them with practiced efficiency. "You mentioned earlier that you'd seen her with this bag?" My mom nodded. Soft. Too soft. Yes. We didn't know what it was exactly, but she's been different lately. Distant. Different. Distant. We thought it was college stress, my dad added, finally speaking. But she's been isolating herself, acting unpredictable. It was like watching someone else's nightmare, except it had my name on it. My room, my dresser, my life getting rewritten in real time. "You can't be serious," I said. "Natalie, she's the one who—" "Don't make this harder than it already is," my mom cut in, her voice low but sharp. They cuffed me in the hallway. The metal was cold against my wrists. Copper stood up, whining softly, confused by the tension. One of the officers told him to stay back. Natalie hadn't moved from her spot on the stairs. She just watched, her eyes tracking my movement all the way to the front door. No tears, no guilt, no emotion at all. Just blank, like I was already erased. I didn't cry. Not then. The cuffs were too tight, the air felt wrong, my skin felt wrong, like I'd left my real self behind in that hallway, right next to the life I thought I had. The back seat of the patrol car was cramped and smelled like disinfectant. The window was streaked with fingerprints. As we pulled away, I watched our house get smaller in the side mirror. It didn't look like a crime scene. It looked like home, and somehow that made everything worse. Natalie had planted those drugs. My parents had backed her up. And I had let them walk me out like I was the family shame they'd finally gotten rid of, which, come to think of it, maybe I was. There had always been a golden child in our house, and it wasn't me. Natalie was born 2 years before me, and somehow, through some cosmic lottery, she was everything they'd ever wanted. Smart, charismatic, photogenic, one of those kids who never had a messy room or took a bad picture. When she cried in public, strangers offered her tissues and kind words. When I cried, I got told to pull myself together. I don't think my parents ever meant to make me feel invisible, but they did it repeatedly, consistently, in ways so subtle it took me years to realize I wasn't imagining things. When Natalie brought home a lopsided pottery project from summer camp, they cleared space on the kitchen counter to display it. When I spent weeks perfecting a science fair project, it ended up shoved in the garage next to paint cans and Christmas decorations. The pattern was set early, and I was always the supporting character in Natalie's starring role. When Natalie had her violin recitals, they invited the neighbors and made fancy appetizers. When I was chosen for the debate team nationals, they said they'd try to make it but had a work conference that weekend. They weren't cruel, just selective with their attention, like I only existed in the quiet spaces between their pride and her achievements. I used to think if I just tried harder, got better grades, stayed out of trouble, kept my room perfect, they'd finally see me. But all it really did was make me easier to overlook. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, but the quiet one gets forgotten. When Natalie turned 15, she campaigned for a dog. She made PowerPoint presentations, wrote contracts in colored pens, threw around phrases like therapeutic companion and building character. My parents, predictably, caved. Enter Copper, a sweet, energetic beagle mix who looked like he'd been assembled from the best parts of every dog calendar. Natalie adored him for exactly 3 weeks. Then she got bored. Said he was too hyper, too needy, too much work. My parents nodded sympathetically and started making calls to animal shelters. If nobody wants him, I remember my mom saying, we might have to consider putting him down. It's not fair to keep an unwanted pet. Like he was a broken appliance past its warranty date. I was 13. I said I'd take care of him, feed him, walk him, train him, everything. They didn't believe me, but they didn't want to deal with him either, so they agreed with the kind of shrug that said your funeral. But Copper wasn't a burden. He was the first thing in that house that ever chose me over Natalie. He slept curled against my legs every night. He'd bark when people raised their voices. He followed me from room to room like I was his entire universe. And yeah, maybe I got too attached. Maybe I talked to him more than I talked to people. But Copper listened, and in that house, being heard was a rare luxury. My grandfather was the only adult who actually saw me. He lived about 15 minutes away in a brick ranch house that always smelled like coffee and old books. Whenever things got tense at home, which was often, I'd grab Copper's leash and announce I was going for a walk. Then we'd slip away to Grandpa Joe's house and pretend we belonged somewhere. He wasn't like my parents. He didn't interrupt or offer unsolicited advice. He just made grilled cheese sandwiches and listened while I talked about school, books, or how Natalie had screamed at me for borrowing her hair straightener without permission. Sometimes I'd sit on his back porch until the streetlights came on, watching Copper chase fireflies in the yard. Sometimes I didn't want to leave at all. He's in his 80s now, still sharp as a tack. Still calls every Sunday at exactly 9 a.m. Still acts like I'm the grandchild worth checking on. When Natalie left for Northwestern University, the house got quieter. Not peaceful, just hollow. My parents started texting her constantly, like she was a missing organ they couldn't function without. She came back after sophomore year. No warning, no explanation beyond college was toxic. That was her entire summary. Natalie moved back into her old room and immediately transformed it into a fortress. Door locked constantly, hour-long showers, friends I'd never met showing up at strange times. Guys with expensive cars and designer clothes who called me little sis, with smirks that made my skin crawl. I started noticing things. The sweet, skunky smell seeping from under her door. Phone calls that lasted until 3 a.m., her voice slurred and giggly. The way she'd jump when someone knocked too loudly or a door slammed. She'd hover around me more now, lingering outside my room, studying me with this calculating look that made me feel like a problem she was trying to solve. But I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was reading too much into normal sibling weirdness. And even if I wasn't, who would have believed me? In our family, questioning Natalie was like questioning gravity. The night before my arrest, I'd been at the library until closing, working on a research paper about criminal justice reform. Ironic, considering. When I got home around 10, the house was dark except for the blue glow of the TV in the living room. My parents were watching some crime documentary, completely absorbed. How was the library? My mom asked without looking away from the screen. Fine, I said. I'm going to bed. Nobody said goodnight. I remember checking on Copper before heading upstairs. He was curled up in his bed by the kitchen door, tail thumping when he saw me. I scratched behind his ears and whispered, "See you in the morning, buddy." I should have stayed downstairs with him. Should have slept on the couch, done anything but go to my room and leave it unguarded. But hindsight is 20/20, and I was just a tired college student who wanted to fall asleep reading. I woke up the next morning to my alarm like always. Showered, got dressed, grabbed a granola bar for breakfast. Normal Wednesday routine. My parents were already gone for work. Natalie's door was closed, which wasn't unusual since she rarely surfaced before noon. I kissed Copper goodbye and headed to campus for my morning classes. American history, statistics, lunch with my study group at the campus Starbucks. Completely ordinary. Completely unsuspicious. If someone had told me that in 8 hours I'd be sitting in a holding cell, I would have laughed in their face. But that's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't announce itself with dramatic music and ominous lighting. It shows up wearing the mask of a normal day, carrying flowers and smiling, right up until it stabs you in the back. The knock came at exactly 4:37 p.m. I know because I was checking the time, wondering if I should start on my homework or take Copper for his afternoon walk first. I chose the door. Biggest mistake of my life? Maybe. But then again, they would have gotten in eventually. Natalie had made sure of that when she made her anonymous call that morning, right after I left for school. Right after she planted evidence in my dresser drawer and practiced looking surprised. They put me in a holding cell with concrete walls and a bench just wide enough to sit on but not lie down. Nobody told me anything, no timeline, no formal charges, just cold air and fluorescent lights that hummed like angry wasps. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even really thinking. It felt like someone had scooped out my brain and filled the empty space with static. I kept picturing Copper lying by the front window, ears perked every time a car passed, waiting for me to come home. He wouldn't eat dinner without me there. He was loyal like that, devoted to a fault. I imagined my parents shaking their heads sadly, maybe already calling shelters. "We can't keep him now," they'd say. "Not under these circumstances." Like Copper was contaminated too, guilty by association. I thought about Grandpa Joe. I wondered if anyone had called to tell him where I was. If his voice had cracked when they said my name and the word arrested in the same sentence. Maybe he believed I was innocent. Maybe he didn't. Either way, I could picture the silence that must have followed, the kind that stretches between people when words become useless. They brought me to a meeting room the next day. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting, a table that had probably witnessed more confessions than a Catholic church. My parents were already seated when I walked in, looking like they were waiting for a doctor to deliver test results. Mom gave me a soft smile. Dad did that slow nod he used when he felt obligated to acknowledge someone but didn't want to actually engage. "Are they treating you okay?" my mom asked. Her tone was gentle, almost concerned, like she was asking if the hotel room had clean towels. "They gave me a sandwich," I said. She smiled like that resolved something important. "We brought you some toiletries," my dad added. "They said they'd get them to you soon." I didn't respond. I was too busy watching how they wouldn't look directly at me. It wasn't guilt or fear. It was management, like they were trying to contain a situation they thought could still be salvaged. Finally, I said it. Quiet but clear, "You know it wasn't me." Neither of them reacted. My mom took a breath like she was preparing for a scripted response. Hazel, we need to focus on moving forward. We can't change what's already happened. That's one way to avoid saying it out loud, I muttered. Dad leaned forward. Nobody's saying this was intentional. I turned to stare at him. You mean the drugs Natalie put in my drawer? That kind of unintentional. My mom flinched slightly. Hazel, this isn't the time for accusations. Accusations. Like I was making things up, spinning fairy tales from a jail cell. You're really going to let this happen? I asked. You're just going to sit there and let them destroy me? You're young, my dad said. This won't follow you forever. My mom nodded. It's better to keep things quiet. If we make a big scene, Hazel, it could get much worse for everyone. There it was. The word they wouldn't say, family. Not truth, not justice, family preservation. I didn't argue anymore. There was no point. They weren't here to support me, they were here to hand me the script and make sure I knew my lines. But then I remembered something. It hit me like lightning in the middle of their carefully rehearsed damage control session. The bear. The stuffed teddy bear on my bookshelf with the tiny camera hidden in its left eye. I'd bought it online last year for $39 when Copper started having those little seizures. Just wanted to monitor him when I wasn't home. Motion-activated recording, stores everything on a micro SD card. No Wi-Fi, no cloud storage, just a cheap nanny cam disguised as childhood nostalgia. I'd never told anyone about it. Not because I was hiding anything, but because nobody in my family cared enough about Copper to ask how I was monitoring his health. And honestly, if they knew I had a camera in my room, I'd never hear the end of their privacy lectures. But it faced my dresser. Full view of the entire room. And if Natalie had gone in there while I was at school, planted those drugs while she thought nobody was watching. My pulse jumped, but I kept my face neutral. If I told my parents now, they'd probably warn Natalie, give her a chance to destroy the evidence before anyone could check. I needed to get to that SD card first. They gave me one phone call. I used it wisely. Brooklyn. My best friend since middle school picked up on the second ring. Hey, what's up? You sound weird. I need a huge favor, I said. And I need you to do it today, no questions asked. Okay, you're scaring me. Are you okay? No, but I will be if you help me. There's a brown teddy bear on my bookshelf, the one with the red bow tie. Inside the left eye is a tiny camera. I need you to get it, take out the SD card, and keep it safe. Silence. Then, Hazel, where are you calling from? County jail. Long story. Can you do this for me or not? Of course. But. No buts. Don't tell anyone, don't leave it there, don't let my parents see you take it. Park a block away and sneak in through the back gate. You still have the spare key I gave you, right? Yeah, it's on my keychain. Good. And Brooklyn? Take Copper with you. Keep him at your house until I figure this out. Another pause. Hazel, what the hell is going on? I'll explain everything later. Right now I just need you to trust me. Okay, she said. I'm leaving now. I hung up and exhaled for the first time in 24 hours. I didn't know what was on that SD card. Maybe nothing. Maybe the camera had malfunctioned, or the memory was full, or Natalie had somehow found it and erased everything. Maybe I was grasping at digital straws. But it was something. A thread I could pull. The only piece of this nightmare that might still belong to me. They thought I'd go down quietly, take the fall like a good little scapegoat. They forgot they'd raised me to be smarter than that. I waited. Hours turned into a day, then 2 days. I stared at concrete walls and thought about all the versions of my future that were spinning out without me. Copper at Brooklyn's house, confused but safe. Grandpa Joe getting half the story from worried neighbors. My parents already rewriting history to make this easier to live with. Then an officer called my name. Said my lawyer was waiting. They led me to a small room with better lighting and actual chairs instead of benches. A woman in her 30s sat at the table, professional but not intimidating. She had kind eyes and a briefcase that looked like it had seen some battles. I'm Amanda Walsh, she said, standing to shake my hand. Your grandfather hired me. My throat tightened. Of course he had. Of course Grandpa Joe was the one looking out for me when my own parents had written me off. Amanda sat back down and opened her briefcase. "We need to talk about your case. But first," she pulled out a small plastic bag containing an SD card. "Your friend Brooklyn gave me this. Said you'd explain what it was." I told her everything. The camera, the bear, what I suspected was on that card. She plugged it into her laptop right there in the jail conference room. The footage was crystal clear. There was Natalie, walking into my room like she owned it. Tuesday afternoon, 11:47 a.m., exactly 3 hours after I'd left for campus. She looked around nervously, then reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a clear baggie full of white pills. She went straight to my dresser, opened the bottom drawer, and tucked the drugs behind my old sweaters. She didn't touch anything else. Didn't try to make it look natural or hidden. Just planted the evidence and left. Timestamp, 1 day before my arrest. Amanda turned the laptop toward me. "This is enough," she said. "More than enough." The charges against me were dropped that afternoon. Amanda scheduled a family meeting for the next morning, called it a pre-trial conference to clarify witness statements. Very official, very neutral. My parents agreed to attend. So did Natalie. They put us in a small conference room at the courthouse. Everything was beige and fluorescent, like the walls were tired of listening to people lie to each other. Amanda didn't waste time with small talk. She opened her laptop and turned it toward my family. "I'd like to share some video evidence," she said calmly. The footage played. Natalie on screen, walking into my room, planting drugs in my dresser. Clear as daylight. Undeniable. My mom's face went white, not like she'd seen a ghost, but like she'd become one. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked at Natalie, then quickly away. My dad stared at the laptop screen like it might change if he concentrated hard enough. Natalie sat frozen until the video ended. Then, like someone had cut the strings holding her together, she blurted, "It wasn't supposed to go this far. She wasn't supposed to actually get arrested." The silence that followed was deafening. "So," Amanda said, closing the laptop, "would anyone like to revise their previous statements?" My mom broke first. "We were trying to protect the family," she whispered. "No," I said, finally finding my voice. "You were protecting yourselves." And for the first time in my life, they had to sit there and listen while I told the truth.